All right, girls, so we are going to continue looking at completing the square when we have a quadratic equation in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is an integer that is not 1. So these are slightly a little bit more complicated than what we looked at last class, and we are just going to practice a few of these, knowing that these would be more of like a challenge type problem. So see if you can follow along with your guided notes. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the problem that I have shown, example 1, which is 2y squared plus 2y plus 5 equals 0. So I'm just going to copy that at the top of this box. And the steps are going to be essentially the same that we looked at last class. There's just one slight difference to step number 2. So the first step, like before, was to transform the equation so that the constant term is alone on the right side. So that means that we're going to be taking a look at the 5, right? So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So that gives you an answer of 2y squared plus 2y. Remember, we're going to leave a space, and we're going to set that equal to negative 5. All right, so step 2 says if a, the coefficient of the second degree term, which is the 2 right here, is not equal to 1, then we have to divide both sides by a. So we need to divide both sides by 2. So I'm going to divide the left by 2 and divide the right by 2. So we get a solution so far of y squared plus y equals negative 5 halves. And remember, we just want to keep a space in between so that we can add our square. Okay, so we're just going to continue following the same steps that we did from yesterday. So we are going to add the square of the coefficient of the first term. I'm sorry, the square of the half of the coefficient of the first term, which is b over 2a squared, to both sides. So that's going to mean that we're going to add 1 over 2 times 1. We're going to square that. So that's going to give us an answer of 1/2 squared, which equals 1/4. So we're going to add this plus 1/4 to both sides of our equation. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and start to simplify and factor. So if I need to factor this, I know that that's going to be y plus 1/2 quantity squared, and then that's going to be set equal to, and we need to add these two fractions together. So we need to do a little work on the side. So I'm just going to change this. If I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator both by 2 so that I get a denominator of 4, I'm looking at negative 10/4 now. So when I add these two fractions together, I get an answer of negative 9/4. All right, and then we're just going to go ahead and complete the solution by taking the square root of both sides. So we get an answer of y plus 1/2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 9/4. That can be simplified. So that's y plus 1/2 equals plus or minus 3/2 I. And then I just subtract 1/2 from both sides. And my final result is y equals negative 1/2 plus or minus 3/2 I. And that would be your final answer that you get. Okay, so why don't you take a moment to pause the video and see if you can try A on your own. And then if you're feeling up for it, go ahead and try B on your own as well. I'm going to run through the problems now so that you can see the solution, but if you want to give yourself a chance to try it on your own, that would be ideal. Great, so let's take a look at example 2A. So we're going to start off again by rewriting this so that our variables are on one side and our constant is on the other side. So that means that I'm going to take this 30n and I need to bring it to the left, and this 100 I need to bring to the right. So this becomes 5n squared minus 30n. I'm going to leave a space equals negative 100. All right, and then I look at my term in front of my squared coefficient and squared term, and I see the coefficient as 5. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Lucky for us, this time we don't have a fraction. So that gives us n squared minus 6n equals negative 20. All right, so then we're going to complete the square. So that's going to be negative 6 over 2 times 1 quantity squared. So it's going to give us an answer of negative 6 divided by 2, which is negative 3 squared, which equals 9. So therefore, we're going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. And then we simplify that. We're going to factor the left-hand side. So that's going to be n minus 3 quantity squared equals negative 11. We're going to then take the square root of both sides. So I get n minus 3 equals plus or minus I square root 11. And then I'm just going to add 3 to both sides. So my final answer is n equals 3 plus or minus I square root 11. All right, let's take a look at this last example together, where we'll be looking at 2v squared plus 4v plus 1 equals 0. All right, so let's go ahead and subtract 1 to both sides. So my constant is on the right. So I've got 2v squared plus 4v equals negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and divide everything by 2 since my coefficient here is a 2. So I get v squared plus 2v equals negative 1/2. Okay, so now let's go ahead and complete the square. So that's b, which is 2 over 2 times a. And we're going to be squaring that. So that's going to give us 1 squared, which is equal to 1. So that means that we're going to add 1 to both sides. So then go ahead and factor the left-hand side. So that gives us v plus 1 quantity squared equals, and I'm actually going to change this 1 here to be a 2 over 2, just so I can add these fractions. So negative 1/2 plus 2 over 2 is going to give me a positive 1/2. All right, so then we take the square root of both sides, which simplifies to v plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 1/2. All right, so we need to simplify this radical since we've got a square root on the bottom. So that means that we're going to multiply this by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, which now simplifies to v plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 2 over 2. And then we subtract 1 from both sides. So we're finally left with v equals negative 1 plus or minus square root of 2 over 2. And that would be your final answer. All right, I believe I provided you with a worksheet to practice the skill. Just as a note, there are only 2 problems like the video that I just went over. The rest of the problems are a review of what we did the day prior. So if you are having trouble, you can certainly go back and rewatch any of the 2 videos on completing the square. That should help assist you with this. All right, be sure to pop in on any of our Google Meet meetings. If you are having trouble, I'm happy to go over this with you because I know this is a pretty complex problem-solving process. But good luck, and then just keep me posted if you need me. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.